Welcome back, everybody, to the Tennessee Titans franchise here on Madden 23. I know it's been a couple of weeks since the last episode. I do apologize about that. The reason being is I had to finish up the NCAA Next Up season before I could get to the offseason here. And now that the NCAA Next Up season is done, we can get back to business here with our Tennessee Titans as we move forward into the offseason of year number 4. I like the way our team is. We obviously had a very successful season, but ultimately fell short in the AFC Championship. And there's a lot to feel good and bad about this team after our heartbreaking loss. But overall, I like the direction we are in, largely because we finally have a true franchise quarterback with Romeo Colucci, who had an outstanding rookie season for us. In the AFC Championship, we lost to the Jaguars 27-24, and in the playoff game before that at home, we defeated the Chiefs 33-24. Both games were very close, down to the wire. The Kansas City game, we won in overtime. We might be the first team to win an overtime game by 2 possessions, thanks to a field goal and then a game-winning pick 6 by Caleb Farley. And then in this game against the Jaguars, it was very close, really the entire game. I believe we had the lead going into the fourth quarter, and it's kind of fitting because we have blown a number of games late this year. Romeo Colucci was a little disappointing in this game. He was not as good in the playoffs as he was throughout the regular season. And obviously one of the big talking points about this game was our final drive in which we were down by 3. Our offense, who had struggled in the second half, was able to move the ball down the field and put ourselves into field goal range for Mr. Automatic Randy Bullock, who does not miss field goals. And he missed the game-tying kick, which would have brought it into overtime. Normally what I would do here is I would have an episode specifically for the season recap and then do free agency. But since I wanted to move things along, especially after our 2-week hiatus here, I decided to combine them together. So we're going to quick do a recap here. I'll put a timestamp in the description if you would like to skip right over to the offseason portion of today's episode. And we'll start our recap by looking at some of the awards. Romeo Colucci, of course, won the AFC Offensive Rookie of the Year while finishing 7th for the MVP. Caleb Farley finished in 5th for the AFC Defensive Player of the Year. I think he should have been first, but whatever. Derrick Henry barely makes the top running back list at number 10. I feel like that's disrespectful. Scottie Pickens comes in 8th for Best Receiver. James Daniels is in 6th for Best Offensive Lineman. We've got a couple of guys at the back end of the linebacker list with R.J. Robinson in 9th and Harold Landry in 10th. Caleb Farley, of course, wins the Best DB. Very well deserved. And then the Best Kicker, Randy Bullock, ended up finishing in 2nd. I feel like since it's a regular season award, he probably should have won it, but the missed kick at the end of the year kind of hurts him a little bit, even if it is a regular season award. Cooper Kupp wins his 5th Offensive Player of the Year in a row. He has basically had the greatest stretch individually for any player in the history of the league, which I know sounds far-fetched, but he has broken record after record. Here are your other awards. Ajon Wiggins and Giacomo Bavara win the Rookies of the Year for the NFC. Clyde Williamson ends up winning the Best Quarterback with Detroit, leading them to the playoffs for a 3rd consecutive season. Ezekiel Elliott, interestingly, wins Best Running Back now with the Atlanta Falcons. Obviously, you got Cooper Kupp, who has a legacy score of 24,000. Kenneth Scott, the young offensive lineman in Minnesota, I believe he's only in his 2nd season. He wins the Best Offensive Lineman. And then Nick Bosa, Shaq Barrett, usual suspects here for the defense, along with in the secondary, Rashad Fenton, of all people. Now let's take a look at the stats for the year, and we will start with QB1 Romeo Colucci, our stud rookie out of Oklahoma, who we traded up for during last year's draft, a decision that looks like it will pay off and then some. The one small complaint I have with Romeo is he was kind of disappointing in the 2 playoff games, but I'm not too worried about it because we have seen him play well in the college football playoff, and I am confident he'll be a good playoff performer in the future. The ground game was really good. Henry and Bryant are a great duo. Colucci's a threat on the ground. I wouldn't mind using Rocket Reddick or Micah McDuffie a little bit more next year. I think they're both pretty good players as well. Scottie Pickens, he is a legit wide receiver 1. Again, the one concern I have with him is the drops, but other than that, he's really good. But we may look to add another receiver in the offseason. We don't have the clear second option in the passing game. Hot Rod Pryor and Quinn Crew were our next best wide receivers this year, and they were both solid. Traylon Burks was up and down. His deal is up. Of course, we've got Kyle Pitts at tight end, who when healthy is really good, but he did get injured twice this year. He missed 5 games. And when he was healthy, he was a little disappointing, but he did play very well in the playoffs, and he's probably too talented for us to just let go of. Elijah Bryant, also a plus in the passing game as well, but I do think it would be in our best interest to add another receiver. The offensive line was quietly really good, other than Nick Petit-Frere. Nobody allowed more than 5 sacks. The run blocking was good. Evan Smith really broke out. Eugene Treston, out of nowhere, became a very steady left tackle. The offensive line had a hard time staying healthy, though. Nobody played more than 15 games, and pretty much everybody here got hurt at some point during the year. But everybody other than Petit-Frere did play really well, which was good to see. Defensively, our defense was inconsistent this year, but we did have the number 1 scoring defense in the entire league. R.J. Robinson and Asher Gonzalez, the 2 young linebackers, were both very solid. We didn't have any standout pass rushers, but overall a solid unit led by Harold Landry, Trey Hendricks, and Azeez Ojulari. And we've got an older but very good secondary, of course, led by Caleb Farley, who picked off 10 passes this year, including 2 in the playoffs. During the season, I called Caleb Farley the unsung hero of the defense because he's been so good throughout the entirety of the series, but I don't think he's unsung anymore. He has been phenomenal as of recent. 2 pick sixes in both of the playoff games, 7 interceptions in the last 5 weeks. He is him. And he is a free agent this offseason along with Chidobe Awuzie, Kevin Byard, and Juan Thornhill. So our 4 main starters in the secondary are all not under contract this year. And then, of course, our kicker, Randy Bullock, only missed 2 kicks this year in the regular season, but he missed a big one in the playoffs, which costed us an opportunity to potentially go to the Super Bowl. And then Jeffrey Walker, our punter, he had a good season. I think he's one of the better young punters in the league, and I like him on our team going forward. Let's take a look at how the rest of the playoffs ends up going. We'll start with the NFC Championship between the Dallas Cowboys and the San Francisco 49ers, 2 teams who have won a lot of Super Bowls in their days, unlike us in Jacksonville. And the Niners would end up shutting them out 21-0. So the San Francisco 49ers are going to the Super Bowl with a typical Cowboys playoff collapse and a typical Dak Prescott falling on his face moment. So Dallas, the number 1 seed, is out, and we have a Niners and Jaguars Super Bowl, 2 very unlikely teams. The Niners were the 4 seed, and the Jaguars were the 6 seed. These 2 teams were not supposed to be here, but here they are. Interestingly, we played and beat the Niners back in Week 1, just like how we beat every single AFC playoff team this year. Caleb Farley, by the way, won the AFC Defensive Player of the Week with a pick 6. Let's take a look at the Pro Bowl roster here before we get into the Super Bowl. We have Romeo Colucci as a rookie, QB3 for the AFC. We only had 2 other Pro Bowlers, both of whom are in the secondary, with Caleb Farley and Kevin Byard. Being that we were the best team in the AFC and we had the best record in the entire league, and we had a top 5 scoring offense and the number 1 scoring defense, I feel like we should have had more than 3 Pro Bowlers. But, okay, neither here nor there. Beggars can't be choosers, I guess. At least we had those 3 get in. Let's now simulate to the Super Bowl week, and before we talk about the big game, this is the stage in the season where development traits go up. On the offensive side of the ball, we only ended up with 1 player going up in dev, but it is a big one. Romeo Colucci now has superstar development. A big opportunity here for our quarterback to really develop early in his NFL career as he moves up in development trait. This is very exciting. I was expecting him to get superstar, and ultimately he ends up doing so. I'm not sure if it was off of winning the Rookie of the Year or making a Pro Bowl or just happening to play really well. So let me know what abilities you think I should choose for Romeo Colucci. I'm not some superstar ability expert or anything. He's pretty high in all of his archetypes, so he should be able to unlock some of those other abilities pretty early on, but for now he has 2 open slots. Defensively, we again only ended up with 1 player going up in dev, but it is a well-deserved one, being linebacker Asher Gonzalez. I feel like it's pretty easy for linebackers to go up in dev in this game, but he actually deserved it. He had a good season for us this past year. He really improved upon his solid rookie season, so I feel like he does deserve to go up in development trait. We also had 2 hidden dev players on the defensive side of the ball. Francis Bolakomoa's development will be revealed later, while Amani Ward ends up getting star development. So let's now take a look at Super Bowl 60 between the San Francisco 49ers and the Jacksonville Jaguars, two very unlikely teams. You have the Niners, who won all their championships back in the day, against a Jacksonville team who has never made the Super Bowl, let alone won one. Two pretty young quarterbacks with Trevor Lawrence and Trey Lance, both of whom were in the same draft class. Two very solid rosters. The Niners have 399 overall players. Goodness gracious. I'd rather not have a division rival win the Super Bowl, so I guess we are rooting for the Niners. And as we would end up simulating Super Bowl 60, the San Francisco 49ers would get the job done over the Jacksonville Jaguars, as they would win it in a close but low-scoring game, 17-14. Maybe not the most exciting in terms of offense and yardage, but it was a very close game. The Niners led 14-0 at halftime. They led 17-3 after 3 quarters. The Jaguars appeared to have made a nice little comeback in the 4th quarter, but I guess it was not enough to get the job done. So congratulations to the San Francisco 49ers as they win their 6th championship in franchise history, with wide receiver Deebo Samuel end up winning the Super Bowl MVP. Deebo caught 5 passes for over 120 yards and a touchdown. And here are your other awards, featuring Romeo Colucci as the Offensive Rookie of the Year. So that'll bring us into the offseason portion of today's video. Obviously, free agency taking up a bulk of it. But we will start with some other transactions around the league, specifically changes amongst the staff. Let's take a look at the coaches who have been fired. We ended up seeing 3 lose their jobs. And interestingly, the 3 coaches who got fired are all first-year head coaches. They were just hired last year, the first one being Mike Vrabel with the Houston Texans. So Vrabel is out after just 1 season in Houston. It is a total disaster with this team. These guys have the number 1 pick for the 3rd time over the last 4 years. Their young quarterback is trending towards being a bust. They're just going to throw something up the wall and hope it sticks with J.J. Watt as the head coach. They've tried to get offensive masterminds. They've tried to get pure culture guys as the head coach. Nothing has worked with this team. They are not winning games. They're not developing. So they're figuring, why not just try J.J. Watt and see if that works. The Minnesota Vikings fired their head coach, Mac Hutchinson, the father of their quarterback, Kate Hutchinson, and this is obviously a very interesting dynamic. The Vikings do not have a good roster. Kate Hutchinson, the former number 1 overall pick, has been very disappointing. We talked about him as a generational QB talent, and he's been bad over his first 2 years. The Vikings hoped that his father would be able to get the best out of him. That did not happen, and now maybe there's a little bit of a friction between Kate Hutchinson and the Vikings after they fired his dad. So the new head coach of the Minnesota Vikings will be Jason Vrabel, who was previously the offensive coordinator of the Tennessee Titans. And obviously, seeing what Vrabel's been able to do here over the last 3 seasons, I think this is a really good hire for Minnesota. His help in developing Romeo Colucci is really what spurned the Vikings into wanting him, and they're hoping that they can fix Kate Hutchinson, who at one point in time was regarded as the best quarterback prospect in this series. So now we're going to need a new offensive coordinator. The Bears firing their head coach was a major surprise to me, Jack Del Rio, because they only won 5 games last year, and they improved. They won 8 games. They were tied with the Giants, who ended up getting the 7th seed in the NFC, so they nearly made the playoffs. They locked up their franchise quarterback in Justin Fields. It seems like a good season for them, but what I take it is that the Bears viewed Jack Del Rio as a short-term thing, and now they're taking their big swing with Ryan Day, who has been helping with the Ohio State Buckeyes over the last few seasons, a big piece of their dynasty, winning 2 straight national championships, and obviously he is very familiar with Justin Fields. As for our new offensive coordinator, since ours got hired to be Minnesota's coach, we're going to hire Jared Larson from the Rams. I think his real-life equivalent here would be Zach Robinson, who is one of the passing game coordinators with the Rams. If you have had dinner with Sean McVay, you are an NFL mastermind, so I guess that's our thought process here by hiring someone from the Rams. They've developed their young quarterback, Isaiah Gordon, very nicely, so I figured getting somebody from LA would not be the worst idea. That'll now bring us into the re-signings phase of the offseason. We will start off with retirements, and there are a lot of big names here. Aaron Donald, Robert Woods, who's coming off a Pro Bowl season, Zach Ertz, Levante David, Teron Armstead, Travis Kelce, Corey Linsley, Joel Bitonio, Keenan Allen, Micah Hyde, Cordero Patterson, Casey Hayward, and others. Very good group of retirees here, multiple future Hall of Famers headlined by Aaron Donald and Travis Kelce. We did not have anybody retiring. I thought maybe there was an off chance we would have somebody like Kevin Byard or Derrick Henry surprisingly walk, but neither of them will. So now we are into the re-signings phase, and we have got a whole lot of money to spend. We've got $216 million, factoring in the rookie reserve to spend. This team was in a bad spot cap space-wise going into the series, and we have not handed out many big long-term deals other than really Azeez Ojulari. He's the only player under contract 2 years from now making more than $8 million. But that's going to change in about 2 minutes because we have got a large list of players up for re-signings, and luckily we have plenty of money to use on these players. But it is still a lot of guys on this list who we have to bring back. We'll start off with the secondary as we have our 4 main starters, Chidobe Awuzie, Caleb Farley, Kevin Byard, and Juan Thornhill, all looking for new deals. We've got some solid young DBs on the roster, but realistically, we're going to need some of these guys back, specifically Caleb Farley. I would love to just give him the bag. No brainer here whatsoever. We called him the unsung hero of the defense earlier in the year. Now he's just the best player on the defense and the second best player on the roster. How about 5 years, $80 million? He says yes. I know it's a little bit of an overpay. We probably could have got him for less, but we've got all this money, so why risk it? Even if he said no, we would have obviously franchise tagged him, but even so, that means we would not have a franchise tag for other players, and that would create an unnecessary storyline next year of him needing a new deal. So it works out for us. We don't have to worry about it, and it works out for him because he's locked up and he's financially set for life. On the other side, we had Chidobe Awuzie as the other outside corner. He's been with us over the last 2 years. Obviously, you guys know that Chidobe Awuzie is one of my favorite players in the league. I would love to bring him back. But he has missed some time, 3 games in each of the last 2 years, and we've got some good young corners behind him. Cardell Simpson, I think, can be a full main outside guy. Harrison Harrington and Kareem Bouare are both worthy of playing time, and it is a really good cornerback draft class. I do think it's not the worst idea to bring him back, though, but I would say for cheap. We're going to offer him a 1-year team-friendly deal for $10.5 million. He says no. The tag is for well over $20 million, so that means he will hit the open market. As for the safeties, we will start off with Juan Thornhill here. We drafted Amani Ward in the second round last year. I really like Ward. There's not really a reason to keep Juan Thornhill, so I think we're going to let him walk. As for Kevin Byard, I thought about this one a little bit. He has really started to regress, but he is still one of the better safeties in the league. He still made the Pro Bowl this year. He's still a very productive player, and I feel like he's got to retire as a Tennessee Titan. He played his college ball with the Titans. He's been here for around a decade. Him and Derrick Henry are the 2 longest tenured players on the roster. We're going to bring him back for 1 year, a little bit over $15 million. Kevin Byard cannot retire anywhere else. He's got to stick it out as a Titan, and he'll be back, roaming the back end of the secondary with, I guess, Amani Ward this year. Kyle Pitts is next up on the list, and he's an interesting player because we gave up quite a bit, a top 40 pick and Roger McCreary to go out and acquire him last offseason. He's obviously a phenomenal player in terms of his overall talent. He's the second-ranked tight end in the game. He is a unicorn at the position, but he hasn't put all the pieces together. This season, he was not as good as I had expected. Keep in mind, he only played 12 games after getting injured twice. I will say he did play his best football down the line, and he has never missed a game before this season, so I'm not really worried about his injury history. He played well in the playoffs. He played really well the final regular season games after he had come back from his second injury, and I feel like he is too talented to let go. If we were in a bind for money, I would understand it, but we've got $184 million. I feel like we would be foolish to not bring him back, whether that's on a long-term deal or with a franchise tag. We're going to offer him a lot of money. I'm going to give him a very player-friendly deal for around $4 million. You're looking at around $68 million total. And Kyle Pitts would ultimately accept. So he will sign a long-term deal here in Tennessee as the long-term tight end of the future. I think he's going to continue to improve. He's only 25 years old, and I'm confident we're finally going to be able to tap into that potential that we know he has and has had over his NFL career that just hasn't really been fully realized yet. So we've gotten Kyle Pitts back, we've gotten Kevin Byard back, we've gotten Caleb Farley back. We're off to a good start here as we move to the defensive line. We'll start with Michael Pierce. We signed him to be a run stuffer this offseason, and it ended up being kind of a flop of a signing. He didn't really do a whole lot this year. He only played 219 snaps, which is not a whole lot. He got injured very early into the season. When he had come back, he did play quite a bit. But after week 8, he was a total non-factor. He only played more than 20 snaps twice this year. And with younger guys like Francis Boa-Kamoa and Alexander Ekwueme playing well, he just lost his spot. As for Trey Hendrickson, while he is regressing quite a bit, this signing did work out a little bit more. 15 TFL, 7.5 sacks. Nothing crazy, but he was very solid. He is asking for quite a bit of money. I wouldn't mind giving it to him in the open market, but we have Jordan Ruffin, who I like. We have Francis Bullock-Kamoa, who showed a ton of flashes last year, and now we know he has superstar development, which is quite exciting. So he's going to be a full-time starter now, regardless if Trey Hendrickson ends up coming back or not. But for now, we will let him go. I do want to look at what the defensive line market looks like before making a decision with him. We've got a couple of starters on the offensive line with Nate Davis and James Daniels, whose deals are up. I think it would be in our best interest to bring back both of them. I do like where the offensive line is, but I think it's largely in part from these two, who are two of the higher-rated guards in the NFL. We've got some really solid players here. UG Treston really broke out in particular, but he is also a free agent as well. So I think it would be wise to extend these guys. We're going to stick with the neutral 3-year deal for Nate Davis, and he would accept. It's around $10 million per season, not too far off from where his previous contract was. And then James Daniel, we're going to do the same thing. 3 years, neutral deal for him. He's actually a year younger than Nate Davis, despite being drafted a year earlier. He accepts as well. So we've got our guard tandem set for the next 3 years. As for UG Treston, he came out of nowhere as an undrafted free agent who had kind of been bouncing around practice squads. He got some PT last year, and he was really good, and we're going to reward him with a bag. I think he can be our starting left tackle of the future. 3 years, $21 million. I know it's a lot, but I want to make sure we get him here. I don't want him to walk, and I feel like he's earned this payday with how well he performed this season. So now we've got our offensive line fully under contract. We've got 6 starting caliber players, not including Nick Petit-Frere, because he is not under contract and he is not good, and he will not be coming back. But everybody else here is under contract. They're all very solid. I still wouldn't mind adding more offensive linemen, but I like what we're at. Let's go to receiver next with Treylon Burks and Christian Watson. The dialogue here with Watson is a little bit easier. He didn't have a super big role for us after coming in a trade with Green Bay. I think we're going to let him walk. I'd like to see what he can do elsewhere with a bigger role, but he just never really got that opportunity here. So we're going to move on from him. As for Treylon Burks, this is an interesting one because going into this series, Burks was our first-round draft pick. He was a very exciting young prospect for the team, and things started off really good. In Season 1, he eventually dethroned Robert Woods as the best receiver on the team, and he played really well despite missing a few games. He was arguably the best amongst the rookie receivers. Then Scottie Pickens comes in, and then his numbers decline quite a bit. This past season in specific, he missed some more games due to injury, and he just was not all that much of a factor despite being consistently on the field. He just wasn't all that good. And with us developing younger guys like Quinn Crew and Hot Rod Pryor, both of whom are younger and have development traits, I just don't think it would make sense for Treylon Burks to come back. He was pretty solid in the playoffs, but we've got a very deep receiver room. Even if we don't have a clear number 2, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to add to the logjam. If we go out and get a receiver this offseason, it's going to be somebody who's proven and established as a good player. So I think we're going to let him go. Nicholas Petit-Frere, I hinted at it earlier. I don't think he's all that good. He was a revolving door for us this season, allowing 14 sacks despite not even being a full-time starter. And I think it would be in our best interest to let him walk. He's really never been a full-time starter, but he's gotten a lot of snaps throughout his career as a swing tackle. I do want to bring back guard Mafa Tuafathu as depth. He's a solid young player. We're going to give him a 2-year deal for around $6 million. I think he's a really good backup. Brigham Bell at linebacker, again, good depth. We're going to give him a 1-year deal for around $2 million. He will return. Kareem Bouare in the secondary. I like him as a leader with the special teams unit. However, he would decline his offer of 2 years and $5.5 million. Baye Diarra at safety, another guy who I do like. I think he can be solid safety depth for us, especially with Juan Thornhill gone. And then that brings us to Randy Bullock, which is a tough one because Bullock has obviously been very good over the last 4 years, but he's older, he's regressing, and he had the kick against Jacksonville that he missed to send us into overtime of the AFC Championship game. I think it would be in our best interest to move on from Randy Bullock and look at the kicker market this offseason. So we spent a lot of money here in re-signings, around $80 million of our cap space, but it was well worth it. We brought back key players like Caleb Farley, Kyle Pitts, Kevin Byard, a large chunk of the offensive line, and more. So with that, we will now simulate into free agency. We've still got plenty of money, around $135 million in cap, again, factoring in the rookie reserve. We do have a lot more long-term deals, but still plenty of flexibility to spend money. As I took my first look at the free agency class, I was actually pretty impressed. There's a large group of skill position players at the top with CMC, Dalvin Cook, Deebo Samuel, and DJ Moore leading the way, amongst other solid players on both sides of the ball, and plenty of guys who I would be more than happy to spend as $134 million on. So I think the biggest need for our team right now is getting a legit number 2 receiver. Scotty Pickens is really good. Kyle Pitts at tight end is really good, but we could use another one. We can certainly afford a guy like Deebo Samuel or DJ Moore, and sure, adding one of them to the offense would be really fun. And while we maybe don't need to look at the value of these contracts because we have so much money, I think the value of getting a guy like Garrett Wilson for pretty cheap would be a lot more worth it than one of those two. Garrett Wilson wants basically a third of what DJ Moore and Deebo Samuel want, and I think that's a lot better of a long-term move for us. Now, Garrett Wilson is an interesting player because he is a very talented receiver, drafted in the top 10 a few years ago, and we've actually been eyeing him up for a while. Back in Season 2, I mentioned that I nearly had a deal for him at the deadline. Last offseason, I considered trading for him before giving up more for Kyle Pitts. Well, now he's available, and now everything comes full circle as we're going to offer him. He's been a solid player with the Jets, but nothing really all that spectacular, hence why they let him go. And I'm going to overpay a little bit just to make sure we get him. I'm going to give him a 4-year deal for around $44 million total. That's $11 a year. I know he's been inconsistent throughout his career, but I really think we can get the best version of him. I wanted to look at the defensive line next, and Trey Hendrickson is the highest rated player here, but I'm actually a little bit more intrigued by Yannick Ngakoue, but because I think he provides more as a pass rusher. He's not as good of a run defender as Trey Hendrickson, but I've already kind of accepted that our run defense is going to be inconsistent regardless. Ngakoue is a guy who's had some very high sack seasons in his career, and if we sign him, he will now have played for every team in the AFC South, along with a number of other teams, as he has failed to really find a true home. But I think on a short, 1-year, expensive contract, I think he can help provide a spark to the pass rush with Landry, Ojulari, Boa Kamoa, and all of the other young pass rushers we have. I wanted to look into the secondary next. I thought about giving a new deal to Chidobe Awuzie, but Jaquan Brisker really intrigued me, and I thought about it a little bit. I figured we didn't really need both of these guys. Chidobe Awuzie is a little bit better, and he is my boy, but I decided to go with the younger route here, looking to add Jaquan Brisker. He's also a lot cheaper than Awuzie, and again, I don't want to make too many decisions based on money because we have so much, but it doesn't hurt to get someone who's cheaper, younger, and has superstar X factor. I think Brisker will be able to be a versatile piece within the secondary, kind of similarly to how we used Amani Ward this year, but I would play Brisker a little bit more as he is a very proven player. You can put him at safety, you can put him in nickel and dime packages inside at corner. We can have him line out at sub linebacker. There's a lot of different roles we can use him for, and we're going to give him a 2-year deal for around $11 million total. I think that's a bargain for a player of his caliber. We have one more offer left, and the biggest need left is kicker. We don't have the kicker on the roster, and it is a really good kicker class here in free agency. So I decided, since we've got $97 million to play with, why not go for the best one here with Daniel Carlson, who's been a very good kicker with the Las Vegas Raiders for a number of years now, and I think he'd be a good addition to the special teams room. 95 kick power, 91 kick accuracy. He's a lot better in terms of ratings than Randy Bullock. Even if Bullock has been super automatic over the past 4 years, I think Daniel Carlson can be just as good on a 2-year player-friendly deal. So those are going to be our offers. We only offered 4 players, but the system is broken to where it thinks we offered 5, and we can't give out one more negotiation, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. So those are going to be the 4 players we offer here, and ultimately we would get 3 out of the 4 to accept. Garrett Wilson, Daniel Carlson, and Jaquan Brisker have all signed their contracts. They are now with the Tennessee Titans. Unfortunately, Yannick Ngakoue declined. He ended up signing with the New Orleans Saints, so we will not get him. That brings us back to Trey Hendrickson. He's not currently getting any bids, and I would not mind bringing him back, but I decided to look at the trade market potentially for a better pure fit along the defensive line, and I think Ed Oliver with the Bills could be exactly that. He's a good but not great player on the final year of his contract, so it could make sense for the Bills to want to move him. We don't have a ton of draft capital, so I think it'd make more sense for us to give up a player. Their needs are interior offensive line and safety, and luckily those are 2 positions that we happen to be pretty deep at. I think trading away a guy like Sekou Bateau at guard could make a lot of sense. Bateau is a good young player. He is a top 10 rated left guard in the game. He's an 81 overall, 84 with morale. He is also in the final year of his deal, though, and we don't really need him because he's not currently penciled in as a starter since we have James Daniels and Nate Davis. I think this trade straight up wouldn't really be fair for the Bills, so we have an additional pick swap. We will trade away pick 94 in the 3rd round, while they will trade away pick 152 in the 5th round. So we will swap Sekou Bateau for Ed Oliver, and we will move from the 3rd round to the 5th round. So Ed Oliver joins the defensive line. I really like what he's going to be able to provide us. We don't have the pick between 62 and 152, but I guess we're going to have to roll with it. As for stage 2 of free agency, I want to look to add some depth, particularly on the offensive line. As we saw last year, our offensive linemen get hurt pretty easily. We could use some good backups. And we'll start with Sebastian Cross, who was a first-round pick back in Season 1 by the Philadelphia Eagles. And at first, it looked pretty solid. He was a starter as a rookie, and he was okay. But after that, he has struggled to find the field. The Eagles cut him this offseason, looking to add cap space. And so we're going to offer him a 1-year player-friendly deal to potentially challenge for a starting spot on the offensive line, or if nothing else, he can be our swing tackle. We're going to look to add former Georgia Tech guard Ishmael Curley. We just traded a Georgia Tech guard away with Sekou Bateau, and now we're going to add one. We also need a backup center, so we're going to look at Cam Jurgens from the Philadelphia Eagles. I think this will be a nice move to provide us more depth inside, as our center Carlisle Kaplan did miss a couple of games this year. And we're going to go after some other depth players as well, including quarterback Marquez Shakir from the Rams. He is familiar with our new offensive coordinator, and he is a pretty fun and intriguing player. Maybe he can kind of be like our Taysom Hill. Now we are into stage 3. This is the 5th-year option stage. And the player eligible for a 5th-year option this year is wide receiver Scotty Pickens, who we drafted in the 1st round back in Season 1. And this is a pretty easy decision. Scotty Pickens has been one of the better receivers in the league over the last 3 years. Our assistant GM says that he barely was on the field last year, and he doesn't think he would be worth holding on to. I don't need to explain why. That might be the most moronic thing I've ever seen. But yes, we're going to give him the 5th-year option, and eventually we are definitely going to look to sign him to a long-term extension to pair him up with Garrett Wilson, Kyle Pitts, and the other guys in our receiving core. So we don't have to worry about that for now. Most of our depth players who we offered contracts to ended up accepting, other than Marquez Shakir, were still his only offer, though. We would go after a new list of depth pieces, including Brian Asamoah, Darius Thornton, and Isaiah Likely. But there is one more move I want to make here in free agency. There hasn't been a lot of interest in Chidobe Awuzie, so I figured why not just give him a 1-year deal? The Cardinals offer him a pretty low contract, so I figured why not just shoot him an offer? Before we get into the free agency recap, I do have a quick trade here. I wanted to get some more draft capital back that we have lost, so we're going to be trading Samson Juni to the Minnesota Vikings. He hasn't gotten a lot of playing time throughout his career, but he did have a huge interception in the playoffs against Kansas City, which really helped us win that game. And we're going to be getting a 4th-round pick back for him, an early 4th, while swapping 7s. They'll get a 7 this year. We'll get a 7 next year. So here's a look at all the players who have signed to Chidobe Awuzie, Garrett Wilson, Daniel Carlson, Jaquan Brisker, headlining the list. All of those depth players we offered in Stage 3, including Marquez Shakir, ended up accepting. As for the rest of the league, Christian McCaffrey is a Bronco. Dalvin Cook leaves Denver. He will sign with New England. Deebo Samuel is now in the AFC South. After winning the Super Bowl MVP, he's going to join the Colts. DJ Moore, after a year in Houston, goes back to Carolina. How about that? Khalil Mack stays in LA, but he is now a Ram. Christian Kirk to the Packers. He had a big season. Trey Hendrickson now with the Los Angeles Rams as well. Russell Wilson is the new starting quarterback of the Steelers, while DeAndre Smith, the former first-rounder, will finally get to start in Denver. Baker Mayfield will back up Justin Tucker as the quarterback in Las Vegas. Michael Pierce will also be signing with the Raiders. Roger McCreary, former Titan, staying in the NFC South with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And that about does it for some of the notable ones. Treylon Burks does not sign anywhere, although I anticipate he will early in the preseason. Let's take a look at the quarterbacks specifically. We saw the top 2. Desmond Ridder ends up returning to Washington. I think that's the right move. He did lead them to a Super Bowl appearance a couple of years ago. Malik Willis will be the new backup in Green Bay. Kenny Pickett will be the new backup in Washington. And we have some very notable veterans, including Jalen Hurts and Jimmy Garoppolo, along with Jared Goff, who are all unsigned. So that'll wrap up the free agency episode. I like what we were able to do with the roster. We were able to re-sign many of our key players while adding guys like Ed Oliver, Garrett Wilson, and others. Next episode will be our draft preview, followed by the draft itself. I hope everybody enjoyed the episode. Again, I apologize that this series has not been here for the last 2 weeks, but I'm excited that it will be back at a regular schedule until the release of Madden 23, or Madden 24. Silly me. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.